Hi, and welcome to my YouTube channel, The Intuitive Composer. This is going to be another Reaper tutorial in which I'm going to show you how to take chords that are written for, say, the piano or for an orchestral string patch and disambiguate them, take them apart, and create the separate lines for different instruments. And ordinarily when doing this, it's a lot of grunt work, selecting, copying, pasting, all that kind of stuff. But I found a way to make the process go much more easily, and I'm going to show you how to do that. So I'm going to open Reaper by going to my desktop and double-clicking Reaper, which I already have open to a project that I've been working on, where I have inputted some piano chords. And they sound like this. So I'd like to be able to take the first note of each chord and make it into first violins, the second note into the second violins, the third into the violas, the fourth into the cellos, and the fifth into the basses. And you can do this by selecting individual notes, and if you happen to have a long passage and the notes go up and down a lot, it's very hard to do that, and you're playing around with individual notes and different clicks and right clicks and left. There's a way to automate this. But we need to do some preparatory work first. So to do this preparatory work, go to your browser and search for Reaper Stash, S-T-A-S-H. There it is. Click on that link, and that opens up the Reaper Stash, which is a repository of all sorts of useful things that people can use with Reaper to modify it and customize it. And it includes themes and custom actions and scripts and all kinds of stuff. So go to where it's search. You can log in, create a password. You can do that for the Reaper forum. Highly recommend you do that too. But let's search the uploads for something called a bunch. And there it is, a bunch of MIDI note selection scripts. I'm going to click on that, download it, and that is going to go into my downloads file. And now I can close the stash, and let's go to my downloads file. And we're going to double click on that bunch of notes zip file, and there are all the scripts that are in it. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of them. So click all of them, select them all, go Control C. And now you can close this and go back to Reaper, and there we are. And what we need to do now is go to Options, then scroll down, Show Reaper Resource Path in Explorer Finder. And that will show you where Reaper keeps a whole bunch of resources, color themes and cursors and various data and FX change and so on. And it also has scripts. So click on the scripts and open it up. And I've already created a folder called MIDI, and I've already pasted those in. But just to show you, let me just get rid of this folder right now, delete. So what would you do here is you create a new folder. What am I doing? New folder, call it MIDI. Go to that folder, hit Control V or paste, and that put those scripts in there. Remember where this folder is. Different installs of Reaper will have it in different places. You can always find where it is by going to the options, Show Reaper Resource Paths. You'll know where they are. But you're going to need, at some point, you're going to need to know where these things are. And now let's go back to Reaper. And we have another thing that we need to do. We need to install those scripts. So go to the action list by clicking this button. If you saw my previous video, I created a button for showing the action list. If not, hit the question mark key, and there's the action list. And then make sure you go to the MIDI editor. And now, because if you don't do this in the MIDI editor, you won't be able to find these scripts. So go to New Action, Load RIA Script. Find where you have those RIA scripts in your Reaper Resource Path, Scripts, MIDI, select them all, and click Open. And now they are in the MIDI editor list of actions. We can close this. And now let's double click on our MIDI item and modify the toolbar. And there are 5 things you're going to put into the toolbar. So right click, go customize toolbar, add an action. Search for select highest. And there are 2 scripts for selecting the highest notes in a chord. This one called note select highest in selected chords, leave single notes selected, and MIDI enter note select highest in selected chords. Click those 2 and go select. And now we're going to search for mute. And we need mute event toggle. So select that. We need select all muted notes. Select that. And we need another script called invert selection. I-N-V-E-R-T, invert selection. Select that. And now we have 5 new things. Close that, and we have 5 of them down here. MIDI note, MIDI note, MIDI event. So let's edit the names of these things. So I'm going to leave these 2 alone. This is mute toggle. I'm going to I'm going to click on that, click edit, change the tooltip text icon to mute toggle. And this one I'm going to, click on it, edit, set tooltips text icon. This is select. I'm going to have to abbreviate this, muted. And the last one is invert selection. Let's see how that looks. That's close enough. So we now apply, OK, and we have those 5 items over here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now, when we look at the 2 possible MIDI note selections, one is select the highest notes in the chords, leave a single note selected, and the other one is select highest notes in the chord. I think that has to do with when you have notes that are not part of a particular chord. But I've never really been able to figure out how to use those 2 things effectively, and whoever of you uses these and figures it out, please put some comments into the bottom so we'll all know. So here we have our piano sketch. And what we want to be able to do is take the top line and give it to the first violins, and the next line to the next violins, and so on. And you can do this manually by selecting these, and then if I go down there, I get into trouble. I start selecting more than one, so you can start unselecting those by click. So you'd have to do a lot of clicking and unclicking and control clicking and backwards clicking and so forth. And this is a very inefficient way of doing things, and this is a relatively simple chordal pattern. The more complicated it gets, the easier my method becomes. So we want to be able to, the first thing I want to do is I'm going to go Alt-D and get out of the MIDI editor, and I'm going to copy this first one down to the first violins. The first violins are over here. I'm going to hit the Control key and drag this MIDI item down to the first violins, and I do not know why it keeps giving me the volume tag as I do that, so go to each one and click V, and that closes the volume thing up. Don't need to see it. And now I've got it in the first violins. We're going to close this, make it smaller, and we're going to double click this. And now what we want to do is select the top notes. And in order to select everything, hit Control A. And go to either one of these MIDI note selectors, and it's going to select the high ones. And the simplest thing you can do now is invert the selection. And now go toggle mute. And now what you have is the top line, everything else is muted. Wow. That was quick and easy. Alt-D takes you back to the track control panel. Let's take the first violins and copy that down to the second violins. For some reason it did it without putting in the volume envelope. Double click it. Now we want to be able to select the top line and get rid of it because that line is done for the first violins. And there's a number of ways of doing it, but the safest way to do this is do Control A, toggle mute, select mute, and hit the delete key. And now they're gone. And now we simply reiterate the process. Select the top line. Oops, Control A, select everything. Select the top line MIDI note, invert the selection, toggle mute, and now you have the next top line. Alt-D takes you to the back to the track control panel. Control drag brings you to the violas. And close that volume thing if it opens up. And same thing here. Control A, toggle the mute, select mute, delete the muted notes. Control A, select the top line, invert the selection, toggle the mute, and now you have the top line again. Alt-D takes you back to the track control panel. Drag this down one more time to the cellos. Oops, control drag. There it is. Same thing, Control A, toggle mute, select the mute, delete. Select all, Control A, select the top notes, invert the selection, toggle the mute. And now you have the cellos. And now we're going to take this and drag it to the basses. And again, we got this volume thing, the V key. And for the basses, all we need to do is select everything, toggle the mute, and now we got the bass line. And that's everything. That's the whole thing. Let's mute this track so you don't hear it. Let's go back to the beginning, play it, and hear what it sounds like. Now you can edit this, and I'm going to do a bunch of things later on, but you can edit this by adding dynamics to it. You can edit the notes. And what I'm going to do now is I don't like what I did in the bass part. I'd like to take one of these notes and make it go down. So I'm just going to open the bass line. Actually, we can open all of them. So I'm going to right-click, open them all, but click on the bass. And so the bass is now editable. And I'm just going to select these two bass notes and bring them down an octave. And I think that's going to sound a little better. Back to the track control panel. So at this point, I usually leave these alone. I leave the muted notes there in case I want to fool around with them and mix and match. But when you're done and you know you've got the lines that you want, and the idea is that the violins and each of the instruments should be playing a line that is internally consistent. And you can do anything you want with them at this point. Like I said, the next thing I'm going to do is add dynamics and expression and volume control and things like that. And so that's it. Meantime, you still have your initial MIDI item with everything in it. So what I would do now is to save this as a new copy of this project. And then I can remove the piano sketch, but I can always go back to it, to the old project and find it again. When you're done and you know you've edited it to the degree you want, you can go to the individual lines, select mute, and delete the muted notes. Go to the next one. Select mute, delete the muted notes. Next one. Select mute, delete the muted notes. Next one, select mute, delete muted notes. Next one, select mute and delete the muted notes. And now you have all the lines without the muted notes in them. And that's how you do it. That's how you can very quickly and easily take what is a complicated patch of music, a complicated set of chords with notes that may, well, in this case they do. The first violins come down lower than the second line of violins at some point, so it's very difficult to make selections within this. It's also very easy to keep straight which instrument is which, because each time you iterate this, you get rid of the top line and you create a new top line. So you know exactly where you are and which notes you've assigned to which instrument, and you can see that very quickly. And if I were to look at this whole thing again, so I select everything and double click it, there is everything right there. I mean, the colors aren't terrific in this, but all those notes are there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's it. That's how you do this disentangling of a chordal patch into various different instruments. And you can put those anywhere you want. They don't have to be strings. You can put some of it in the brass and some of it in the woodwinds and so on. But this is a simple way of taking chords and breaking them up into individual lines. And when we're thinking about composing, we really need to think about individual lines. The violins don't play a chord, and they play single notes. But the line of notes that they play is something that should sound good by itself. What you want to be able to do is have each of the sections play a line that is cohesive into itself. So you can start to work with each of those lines and play with them and move them, re-edit them, copy them to a different instrument patch and create a new version of it, and so on. And that's how you can get into the process of intuitively composing and playing with what you see there. So that's the end of this video. The next video as a Reaper tutorial will be looking at the orchestral template I have and how I set that up to quickly and easily see what I'm working with at any given point of time, so that you can do your mixing and mastering very quickly all on one screen without flipping back and forth and scrolling up and down and trying to find your way through thousands of tracks. So that's a whole other different process, and I'm not sure when I'll get to that, but stay tuned. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video.